Tanya Johor Darul Taksim. Kemenangan pertama di China dan kemenangan pertama dalam AFC Champions League Elite musim ini. The Malaysian champions achieved these two milestones through a collective, disciplined tactical approach and solid control of the game as they recorded their first win in Asia's top club competition in a 2-0 away win over Chengdu Rongchen of China. And Oscar Arribas scored the first goal just 5 minutes in before Nacho Mendes completed the victory just after the hour mark. And with the result of this victory, Johor are now back in the top 8 position and remain in contention to qualify for the next round of the competition with 5 rounds remaining. And this puts them in good state as they face a game in a series of matches against slightly matchable opponents in against the two Shanghai clubs, Shanghai Shenhua and Shanghai Port, with a visit to Melbourne City in between. So if they can build on this success in Chengdu with another 3 victories or at least 7 points out of those 3 matches, then a place in the round of 16 is almost as good as certain. Still, it was a rather good collective effort in spite of a number of puzzling selections in Cisco Munoz starting 11. Malaysia's number 1 goalkeeper Shihan Hasmi, who single-handedly helped the Southern Tigers achieve 1 point at home against J1 League side Machida Zelvia in their last outing in the ACLE, was back on the bench, with Adoni Zubair returning to his position between the posts. And in the 3-man defense were Eddie Isafilov in the middle, anchored by Antonio Gauda and Raul Para, with Oscar Arribas moved from his usual left wing back position or left midfield position to right wing back, with Jonathan Vieira placed at left wing back. In centre mid, you have the usual midfield duo of Afiq Faisal, the captain of the evening, alongside Nacho Mendes, and Agio Akazete was back on the left wing in the 3-man forward line, with Jairo being the lone centre forward, with AFC Player of the Year nominee Arif Aiman in his usual right wing position. And while Johor set out for their mission to gain their first points of the season after a not so great start to their Asian campaign, Chengdu Rongchen were doing the opposite. They actually rested all their import players, with only 2 naturalized players. I think not 2. One Taiwanese player, Tim Chow, being the captain of the Chinese Super League side for the evening, with the naturalized Portuguese midfielder Perador being named in the starting lineup alongside 9 local-born Chinese, among whom included a number of national team players, but also significantly had a couple of key players totally omitted from their matchday squad. China national team star midfielder Wei Shihao and their key Brazilian playmaker Romero were not even on the bench for this game. All their other imports were named as among the substitutes. It is pretty clear that Johor were already given quite an advantage, quite a head start, because they focused on fielding their strongest 11, while Chengdu, led by Seojung Wong of South Korea, had one eye on the continued Chinese Super League title chase as their domestic season reaches its climax. Because with 3 rounds of games to go towards the end of the year-long Chinese Super League season, Chengdu are currently second in the standings, sandwiched in between league leaders Shanghai Port and third place Shanghai Shenhua, all of whom are currently involved in this ACLE season. They are only separated by 3 points. And with every game mattering in the league towards the climax, I mean towards the championship, it was pretty obvious that Xiu Zhuang's priorities was more towards getting his players fresh ahead of the crucial domestic league games ahead. And I think I say this in advance, for JDT's next ACLE opponents, Shanghai Shenhua, it is probably the same case, especially if in 2 weeks' time, the season, if the title is still not yet decided. So, with that one eye on the Chinese Super League, Chengdu fielded a number of fringe players just to fill up, just to, you can say, make up the numbers or whatever you call it, because it's very clear that it is because of the Chinese host's priorities elsewhere that fundamentally handed the game to Johor. But the Malaysian champions still have to make it count. And make it count they did, as they dominated the first half, particularly from the get-go. That first goal after just 5 minutes illustrated where things had gone right for Johor, despite, I admit, a few eyebrow-raising selections by Cisco Munoz, who the jury is still out on whether he is suitably qualified to bring the Malaysian champions further in Asia. So, where this is concerned, the first goal came as a result of, you can say, when your backline is not your strongest backline, and that is despite having your usual first choice goalkeeper Liu Dianzuo in goal, it is pretty obvious that the gaps that they created in defense allowed Gyro to free up Oscar Arribas down the right to burst into the box and place a well executed low shot below the goalkeeper's reach for the opening goal. And not only that, they could actually have scored more. In fact, by the first half, if their shots had been on target, especially we can count efforts from Gyro, Arif Aiman, Aketzer, all of whom had their shots straight at their goalkeeper, with Arif actually having one or two more attempts off target. And this was in spite of him, the Malaysia's star midfielder, being given double the attention. Yes, Arif's race profile has caused some concerns in the Chengdu backroom staff, enough for Seo to actually assign a couple of markers to make sure that Arif's involvement was not as much as they would have liked. And as much as they fouled him, as much as they closed him down, as much as they kept him as quiet as possible, Arif still found enough space for much of the game to be an effective, even though he wasn't the standout player of the evening. And because of the Chinese attention on not just on Arif Aiman, but also in the way how they tried to foul Gyro out of the game, this allowed the remaining 9 players to play their game, especially when the space was afforded to them so freely in midfield in the first 45 minutes. That allowed Nacho Mendes and Afiq Faisal and Akazete to control the game from the middle of the park and make quick transitions from defense to attack through their swift counterattacks. And because of these swift counterattacks, the rather inexperienced, or the rather ragtag, almost all local Chinese Chengdu lineup were dragged left, right, center, and were all over the place while trying to plug the gaps that Johor were trying to expose, and expose as much as they did. So, with that, with all the havoc they caused, even the early introduction of foreign midfielder Yahav Gofinko, it was not enough, because the Malaysian champions were clearly on the ascendancy after that first opening goal. How bad were Chengdu? They were so bad and so disorganized, and you can say almost took them more than half an hour to get themselves organized in moving forward. But it was pretty evident that in the first half, while Johor were trying to attempt as many shots as possible in order to increase the lead, Chengdu found themselves restricted to only a handful of attempts, with probably one shot that Zubai had to tip away to avoid a freakish goal, and that set the tone for the second half. And this was in spite of Chengdu throwing in two more foreign players in centre back Timur Leshet and their top scorer Felipe at halftime. But still, in spite the first 10 minutes being controlled by the Chinese host, Johor gradually regained control, and the second goal came as a result of some clever play from Akazete to from Akazete to Afiq Faisal on the left, who crossed the ball for Nacho Mendes to find the space and the timing to smash home the second goal and effectively deliver 3 points for Johor to bring home ahead of their next Asian encounter against Shanghai Shenhua in 2 weeks' time. And after the second goal, they effectively controlled the game, and this was in spite of Johor needing to make a halftime change as well, with Shane Lowry coming on for a rare appearance at the heart of Johor's defense in place of Eddie Isafilov. And I should say special mention to Jairo, because he was one of the two who was singled out for special mention, for special attention by the Chinese Super League side. And he was shackled, he was heckled, he was in a way harassed, and he was so frequently fouled that at one point the Johor fans would worry whether he would be able to last the game. And last the game he actually did until the 87th minute when he was replaced by Bergson. By then the game was already done. The game was already sealed. And Jairo, you can say after quite a number of games, he's actually a much better addition to the strikers department than last season's Obregon. Yes, Obregon did improve later on last season, especially in Asia and in the domestic league, but while Obregon was largely anonymous when faced against Asia's best at club level last season, Jairo was actually much more involved. The assist in the 5th minute showed his ability to carve up space for his teammates to break through, to exploit, and attempt to score. And his ability to hold the ball, to position himself in areas where he was most effective, concerned the Chengdu defenders so much that, as I've mentioned earlier, they resorted to double teaming, to hacking him down, to trying to take him out of the game. But overall, it did not succeed, even though Jairo did not score. It was his involvement up front as the lone striker that allowed others to be involved in the game, especially during the first half when they had those swift counter-attacks. By the time the second goal was scored, it was more of having control, and this was a collective effort, because Chengdu could have fielded the same weakened side, but if Johor had not taken those opportunities, had not seized control, and had not dictated the tempo, perhaps Chengdu could have taken advantage. From the way they threw in the foreigners early in the game and as well as at halftime, you knew that they were desperate, and already being distracted by having their top scorer, their top playmaker Romulo and Wei Shihao totally sidelined from this game. It was a case of the creativity, the heartbeat of the team in attack being totally taken out, and that void was never adequately replaced. Instead, that allowed the likes of Arribas, Mendes, Akizete to take control of the narrative in Chengdu. And because you can say there was an unequal strength in terms of the number of foreigners, since there's no import limits or quota for the second successive season in Asian club competitions. So you can say that Johor's were clearly superior to Chengdu's, even with the introduction of the three foreigners by halftime. It was pretty clear. And if you throw in Pedro Delgado, the naturalized Portuguese-born midfielder, the gap did not close as much as would have been anticipated. So, all in, it is pretty clear that that gulf in class made the difference. And as much as I had maligned Cisco Munoz for the way how he approached Asia so far, even including this match, I do credit the former Watford manager for his ability to make this team tick, and having the pre-match build-up, the game plan spot on. I mean, a narrow win in Penang where many of those players who played tonight were not involved. It was their ability to be rested, to be fully charged for this game that has made the significant difference. And granted, Chengdu half gave the win on the platter because of the decision to field a number of bench players, and fringe players in what was almost an all local Chinese lineup. You can't fault Chengdu for doing so, because while Johor are only one quarter into the 25-26 season, Chengdu are finishing their 2025 domestic season. Yes, you can see the vast difference in the league calendar. That means Chengdu came into this game already having a significant level of fatigue, having been involved in the Super League title chase, and also I think there are various cup competition, as well as qualifying for the ACLE through a playoff game in which they won handily against Bangkok United. While Johor had the squad depth, had the players to ensure that even with the continued absence of John Irazabal, Hector Havel, and João Figueiredo through the FIFA imposed 1 year ban, which is FM had already launched an appeal as they mentioned in the press conference last week, Johor showed that they still had the depth to ensure that it remained business as usual. 3 points, their first ever 3 points on Chinese soil, after having lost to Shantou Lunan twice, including one in which was voided last year after Shantou refused to play their final game in South Korea, and also a 3-3 draw with Shanghai Port last season also. So, with their first ever win in China, it is inevitable that the Southern Tigers' confidence in Asia in this stage of the competition will grow, and especially with their next ACLE league fixtures against Shenhua at home, Melbourne away, and Port at home before the year 2025 closes. They stand themselves in very good state to, I think you can say, effectively confirm their place, or technically secure their place in the last 16 before the New Year comes with sterner tests against Japanese opponents Sanfrecce Hiroshima away, and on next year's Lunar's New Year's Day 1, their final home game at this stage against Vissel Kobe. And should they achieve those points that they need in the next 3 league games, you can effectively say that at least that minimal level, the expectations of Cisco Munoz being able to bring these Southern Tigers forward to the next stage of the ACLE for the third time in their club history will have been achieved. And from there, who knows what will happen. But at least a new history is being made under Cisco Munoz. A first ever win on Chinese soil. And with that, they have broken their winless run in the ACLE. And the Johor fans should be confident, should feel now more confident and secure knowing that they know that they do have the players with Gyro a much better upgrade compared to Obregon. And you can say Arif Aiman still being a vital cog and a significant presence where the team continues to operate around with him as the heartbeat. Because when Arif plays, the rest of the team level goes up with him as well. And this was evident in how their performance was in Chengdu compared to how they played without Arif around. And with that, once again, Tahniah Johor Darul Takzim for their first win in Asia this season. And I look forward to more of such positive outcomes for the rest of the league stage campaign.